I'm Lynn Lepre, and I'm the Dean of the School of Communication and the Arts. And I'm so pleased to be here to moderate our panel on disruptive opportunity. We have 4 distinguished panelists here with us today who are members of the Marist community who are going to, as the panelists did for our last panel, talk about their research, how they're incorporating their research into the classroom, all on the topic of disruptive technology. We chose this symposium topic because disruptive technologies impact everyone. These groundbreaking technologies are changing every economy, every single industry, and really every aspect of our lives. They are changing the way that we live, they're changing the way that we work, changing the way we do business, and certainly changing the way we communicate. We could argue that technology disruption has been around for a long time. The Industrial Revolution, for example, it disrupted the auto and printing industries, just as an example. I think the difference here we're going to see today is that our disruptive technologies are moving at a much, much faster pace. At Marist, we recognize that if we are not working proactively to adapt to disruptive technology, then at some point, you're going to have to react to it. We have a long commitment and interest in the study and education of technology and technology-related industries. And technology courses infuse our curriculum and train our students, the future, to be those proactive forces once they leave campus. It is my pleasure then to introduce our panelists, as I said, Marist community members who are researching, working, and educating our students about disruptive technology. Each of our panelists is going to talk for a few minutes about their chosen area, and then we're going to have a little bit of discussion between us, and then we're going to open it up for the floor for some questions. So that'll be our basic guideline for this panel. A little bit different than the last one if you attended it. I'm going to actually introduce everybody individually, so as they're about to speak. So I'm going to start, if I could, with Mr. Ross Maury, who's the General Manager for Z Systems at IBM. In this position, he is responsible for all facets of IBM's system business worldwide, including strategy, architecture, operations, technology development, and overall financial performance. Mr. Maury, who received his bachelor's degree in computer mathematics from Marist, also serves as the vice chairman of the Marist College Board of Trustees. And today, he will be discussing blockchain and open finance.
Thank you
Mr.
very
Maury.
much. If you could flip to that first chart. So I'm not a professor. I wish I was. But blockchain is something that's very important to the world of technology, the world of business, and the world we live in, because blockchain is going to change society, governments, and many of our lives in the near future. It's a fast-moving technology, and whether you're a technologist or not, it is an interesting topic that you can learn about. And if you're not a technologist, I recommend a book by Alex and Don Tapscott, which just came out in May 2016. It's called The Blockchain Revolution. That's a great book for anyone to read and understand the impact of blockchain on the world. Again, on society, governments, democracy, commercialization, markets. Then if you're a geek and you want to get down into cryptocurrency and you wanted to get into a real blockchain database, if you're in computer science, that would be where you would lead to. But today I'm going to try to keep it a little bit higher level. So blockchain is a technology that's moving fast. It was first invented and surfaced in 2008. So 2008 might sound like a long time ago to you, but in the realm of technologies that changed the world, many of the technologies that changed the world, whether it was the vacuum tube or the transistor or microprocessors, those technologies usually took 20, 30, 40 years to actually develop to a point where they could be commercially viable and really have an impact globally. Blockchain is moving much faster than that. It was invented in 2008 as part of a cryptocurrency known as Bitcoin. How many people have heard of Bitcoin? Everybody's heard of Bitcoin, good. Well, that's where blockchain emerged. And it's not, any one part of blockchain is not novel. What was novel is that the people that pulled it together the first time took all these relevant pieces out of computer science and put them together in a novel way for the first time. And what it allowed is it allowed to create a cryptocurrency, a currency that was done digitally. No paper involved, no banks involved. And I'm not going to get into Bitcoin. It's a fascinating study. But what emerged from there is this thing called blockchain, which is more of a technology notion and an architecture. Blockchain has now been implemented by different open consortia as well as private institutions. So there are a number of blockchain implementations out there today. And the industry is sorting itself out on which one is going to be the preferred industry standard. I think that's still a few years in the making before that comes to be. But blockchain is starting to change the world even this year. So let's just put blockchain aside for a second and talk about business. You can think about many aspects of a business, but the one I want you to think about today is a business is really a network. It's a network of suppliers, customers, partners, sometimes governments, certainly banks are usually involved. This happens to be a simple, high-level map of a global financial institution, and it's just meant to represent that businesses are just not one entity, right? They really are a network in terms of how they accomplish their mission and how they will generate wealth. The interesting part about a complex network like this one is what we don't realize if you really go and examine them today, some of the most inefficient parts of those businesses, a business represented like that, is the paper, literal paper, that they mail or fax to each other that embody a contract. That's one of the most inefficient parts of business today. And what blockchain is going to do is blockchain is going to revolutionize that paper that everyone needs to create contracts, sign contracts, to transfer assets and goods. It's going to change that from a paper process into a digital process. Now, let's talk about assets really quickly so you get in your mind the type of assets that blockchain can affect. And it can affect many more of this than this. But it really is, it can affect real assets like a diamond or a car or a house or a boat or a building. It can affect intangible assets like financial instruments, digital music, games, any type of asset. That's what the focus in the beginning that blockchain will be addressing throughout not just the financial services industry, but all industries. There are many uses beyond the transfer of assets, but this is the primary one that has the technology world and the technologists in business of the world very excited and all focused on this technology. So the thing with a contract is that contract usually has to be shared amongst parties, amongst 2 parties, 3 parties, depending on how complex the transaction is. And what blockchain will give us, is a way to replicate a ledger among independent people or organizations in a way that is done, again, somewhat novelly right now with this technology, in a way that it's done so that we in the network kind of all agree to this contract and what state it's in and what the transaction state is in and what the final state is in. So there's 3 words up there over to the right, that I'll just briefly mention and not going to go into deep, but if you want to learn more about blockchain, you'll want to know more about what these words mean in the context of blockchain. The first is consensus, and that there's a consensus that all parties in the blockchain agree to a transaction. That is what gives it its legitimacy, right? That I can't do a fake transaction and fake you out. We all have to agree to it as businesses, as organizations. The second thing up there is called provenance. And that means everyone on the blockchain involved in this transaction knows the status of that asset at any one time. It's a very important notion in this technology. And this technology, again, embodies it and brings it forward and allows organizations to communicate that way. And the final thing is immutability. And I think that's the most important thing. Blockchains are immutable, which means once a blockchain transaction is set, it can never be altered. If it's in error, a new record has to be placed onto the blockchain with the consensus of all the key parties that this record is being updated, but there's an alteration. So it's a permanent record of things that go on. So if you start to, I'm going to end with 2 use cases to try to give you an example of how this all works. But those 3 properties of a blockchain, and the organizations that implement, again, will change business. And again, if you read that book, you're going to see how they're going to change society and government in the long term. So let me do 2 quick examples. The first is an example. It's not neither of these examples are in financial services. I decided to pick at the end. One is in trade logistics. So trade logistics involves multiple businesses. It involves shipping companies. It involves governments. Export regulations, customs and control, right? There's a lot of parties involved. And if we could start to do blockchain trade logistics, we could change the game. Because if you see on this chart, 21% globally of the import-export cost is spent today on air couriers doing what? Mailing paperwork back and forth to complete contracts. And if you actually, and there's studies that back this up, this is a high-level chart, I realize it, but the World Shipping Council believes that there's over 37 billion of potential savings by eliminating this paper trail. If you could eliminate that, it's not, so every company wants to reduce costs, wants to save costs, but more importantly, the time required to mail documents back and forth and do that, imagine if it could all be done in minutes, right? So there's a whole change in how financing of shipping is going to occur, who owns the asset, where it is, and the speed by which a transaction can complete. Lots of times a shipping container will go across the ocean and it takes 3 weeks to get to the next port. Then it'll sit in that port for 2 months while the paperwork gets completed so it can enter the country and the assets in it can be transferred. So that's what we're going to eliminate. And again, on the right, the World Economic Forum in 2003 put out a report that said they believe that elimination of just this one part of the process and doing it electronically could open up a new $1 trillion worth of global exports. Big impact to all of us. So my last chart is just to go through some of the things, and not in detail again, of where blockchain will come into play. Secure data exchanges and make tamper-proof document exchange, right? Digital and automated workflows that now today involve putting something in a FedEx envelope, FedExing it, and having it go across the ocean. One last example, not on a chart, just to give you a different one, is how it could improve the diamond flow. So the flow of diamonds are an asset, obviously they're valuable, but there's a company called Everledger that's trying to automate and blockchain the entire flow of diamonds from a diamond mine in a country. As the raw diamond literally exits the mine, it will be marked and go on the blockchain. And up to the border, that before it exits that country, that's really important to who? It's important to the government to tax that diamond appropriately. It's also important to start to eliminate blood diamonds, because if diamonds are not tracked from the mine out, then the world distribution and control, the companies that control it, De Beers and things like that, will not basically trade in diamonds that are not on the blockchain. So then from that border of that country, the diamond is going to go to one of the 5 cutting centers in the world and be cut from a raw diamond into several smaller or one big, gem. All of those are marked, and then on the blockchain, that raw diamond is then expanded into multiple cut diamonds on the blockchain, and then it goes out through retail distribution. So as Leanne Kemp, again, the CEO of Everledger says, from the mine to the mistress, we're going to have a blockchain that tracks diamonds. And again, I could go on industry after industry. It's transformative. It's exciting for people who are me that are into technology and into business, because I see a great transformation coming. Again, it's starting this year. There's a lot more to come. Read up on blockchain. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and now we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to protect all that information that we just talked about. We're going to be hearing from Dr. Casimer DeCusatis. Dr. DeCusatis is an assistant professor of computer technology who received his doctorate from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. His research interests include cybersecurity, software-defined data centers, and optical networking. He is an IBM Distinguished Engineer Emeritus and an IBM Master Inventor, and holds more than 150 patents. Dr. DeCusatis is currently the principal investigator for the NSF Secure Cloud program at Marist. And today he will be discussing the importance of cybersecurity. Dr. DeCusatis.
Great. Thank you very much, Lynn, and congratulations on pronouncing my name correctly.
Thank you. I've been practicing.
Very well done. Appreciate that. So what I'd like to talk about is cybersecurity as a disruptive technology. I think it certainly meets the criteria. It has a huge impact on every single one of us. It's very different now than it was a few years ago. And we see new technologies that are changing the way we do our day-to-day transactions and live our day-to-day lives that are going to become more and more complicated as our students go out in the real world. As a professor here at Marist College, I get to work with all of the companies and academic institutions shown on this first slide. So I get a perspective of what's going on across the whole industry. As a partner with the New York State Cloud Computing and Analytics Center, I get to see the latest developments in cloud computing and security. Security, in fact, is one of the main things that's stopping more people from moving into the cloud. Ross, you were talking about finance and blockchain. If you look at the cost per transaction in the finance industry as a whole, it's about 2 or 3 times higher than it is in retail, entertainment, or any other market vertical. They would love to move into the cloud more than they are today and get those cost reductions. Security is one of the main issues why they're not doing that. But cloud computing and security for banks isn't the main reason this is disruptive. It's disruptive because it affects every single one of us every day. I could go on and on with examples about this. It wasn't more than about 2 weeks ago on the front page of the New York Times, we saw how there was a major attack that knocked Twitter, Netflix, a whole bunch of other major companies offline in mid-October. That happened because someone was able to co-opt devices on the Internet of Things. Fitbits, smart cameras, telephones, all those sorts of devices, and turn them into a gigantic botnet that they use to attack major service providers. That's unheard of. If I was talking about security 10 or 15 years ago, I'd be talking about high school or college kids trying to prove themselves and get some street cred by defacing websites, or maybe disgruntled employees that were trying to get back at their company for firing them. And that's no longer the case. Cybersecurity has become big business for the bad guys. They're organized. They've got resources behind them. Sometimes governments or nation states behind them. And they're attacking everything. There really isn't such a thing as a secure website anymore. There's probably very few things as secure applications, with the possible exception of a few things that run on IBM Z systems or some of the things that are in the government that really aren't connected to the internet. You'll see all the household names up there. Everyone's heard about the Sony hack. We all heard about the attacks against Apple's iPhone, trying to uncover terrorist information last year. The allegations about cybersecurity influencing the presidential election that's coming up next week. I could go on and on. What you might notice, though, is there's also companies up there like Goodwill, a company that is literally trying to prevent, trying to be hacked because they are part of a giant botnet somewhere. I don't know why the slides advance by themselves. Maybe we have some hacking going on right here. But be that as it may, my point is, if people like Goodwill are getting hacked, it's not because they're holding your financial information or your medical records or your college transcripts. It's because these groups are being co-opted for giant botnet attacks. Now, because of all this, there is a tremendous need for cybersecurity professionals. And there's a dramatic shortage right now, between 1 and 2 million people worldwide. If you have an entrepreneurial bent, this is a great time to invest in cybersecurity. Roughly $1 billion in angel funding going towards it within the past year or so. If you're interested in being on the forefront of cybersecurity, New York State is the place to be, because New York State contains New York City, which contains Wall Street. So if you look at my slide, you'll see that our legislature passes more cybersecurity legislation every year than most other states. We tend to be the leaders, and others follow the example that we set. So New York State is a perfect place to study cybersecurity and to develop new leading-edge defenses, not only for Wall Street, but for all of our personal data. So the impact is huge. And it's radically different than it was before. But oftentimes people ask me, why are we still getting attacked this year? They would ask me that if I was on the right slide. They'd ask me, why are we getting attacked? It's 2016. I understand that when the internet first came out, there were vulnerabilities. We didn't know what we were doing. Surely we've fixed all of that by now. Well, it turns out, short answer, security is extremely hard. The long answer takes me 3 courses or more to teach my students, but I'll give you some flavor for it. If you're trying to defend a computer system, you have to defend everything, the whole perimeter. You have to make sure that all the leading edge technologies like cloud and personal devices that you're carrying around are secured. If there's one little crack in that defense, the bad actors are going to get in. You only update your software at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and you have change windows that don't affect the normal operation of your business. The bad guys don't respect that. They're coming at you from everywhere in the world 24/7. And it turns out that because we haven't been teaching cybersecurity at most major colleges and universities, people are getting away with the same attacks over and over again. There's a recent study by the IEEE, cited on my chart, that says that of the top 50 technical universities in the country, there's only a handful that have a dedicated program in cybersecurity. Most don't even offer a specific course in that area. So we desperately need more people. And we desperately need to automate the systems that we have in place now, because if we rely on manual intervention, there's simply not enough skills out there to protect us. Now, luckily, Marist is one of the colleges that happens to be on the forefront of this work. Last year, we announced a new minor in cybersecurity, open to everyone in the college. So you don't have to be a computer science major to do this. You can be in the medical program, the nursing program, and study the HIPAA regulations around personal medical records. You can be in the business major or the criminal justice major and still take advantage of this. We spun up a series of new courses that give you hands-on experience doing hacking, penetration testing, mobile security, device security principles, and lots of other things, using the real tools that people use in the real world. So part of the way we address this gap in security professionals is training more people and giving them hands-on real-world experience. Another way that we address that gap is by automating things that are being done manually today. So as Lynn mentioned, I'm leading a National Science Foundation grant called Secure Cloud. Marist is doing research on first-of-a-kind, next-generation cybersecurity for cloud networking. I'll give you a couple of quick examples of this. In one case, we're working on ways to detect when someone's attacking our networks, classify the types of botnets that are coming after us, and then automate a response. So for example, that hack that was on the front page of the New York Times recently, we have software that would analyze the people who are trying to get into our network, figure out what they have in common, and then automatically spin up an appropriate defense. You need an automated defense because otherwise you have human beings trying to keep up with computers, and that doesn't work very well. So automated defense structures is one thing we're looking at. We're also looking at some novel ways to authenticate users. So how does the computer know who you are? Or more to the point, how does anybody on the internet know who you are? Identity theft is important, and we've come up with new technologies that authenticate every single packet you send across the network to guarantee that we not only know who you are, we know that you're still that person 5 minutes from now or 6 months or a year down the road. Finally, we're working with some analytics technologies here at Marist, where we also have a great major in data analytics that was just spun up. By analyzing large data sets, looking for trends, anomalies, patterns, we're able to find things that would have been impossible to detect just a few years ago. All of this stuff combined into a single testbed architecture is what's going to help us secure the next generation internet from attacks like we've seen this past week. So because cybersecurity affects everyone, we all have a personal stake in this, myself included. I'd like to think the technologies that we're doing research on and that we're training our students in are going to help make the world a safer place in the years to come.
Thank you, Casimer. We're going to go back to finance now for a little bit. Next, we have Mr. Brian Haughey, who is an assistant professor of finance and the director of the Marist Investment Center. He received his bachelor's and master's degrees from University College in Dublin, Ireland. Prior to joining Marist's faculty, he worked in the securities industry for more than 20 years. And today, he will be discussing the impact of new and emerging technology on how investment and technology can be used to predict profits.
Right. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, so I've got about 5 minutes, like everybody else, and I'm going to try and talk about pretty much what I spent a semester talking to my students about. So we're going to go very quickly and give you a high-level flavor of what we're talking about. So the very first thing we need to think about is that we're talking about the impact of investing on the marketplace, new technologies, and efficiency. And really, you can think that we have, there's really three players in the marketplace, if you want to think about it like that. We have the individual, and then we have the marketplace per se, and then we have companies. So individuals interact with companies, individuals interact with the marketplace, and the market interacts with companies. So we want to think about, when we're investing, we want to think about value and we want to think about price. Warren Buffett, among other people, made an interesting aphorism. They said that price is what you pay and value is what we get. So we as individuals, when we're thinking about investing, we have our viewpoint about what the prospects of a company is going to be. We think about what those future earnings are going to be. So we have to think about our perception of the present, and we have to use our judgment to think about the future to come up with what we think the company is going to be worth. The marketplace, on the other hand, is a clearinghouse for everybody and everybody else. And so a company trading in the marketplace will have a price, and that price is really the aggregate of what everybody else thinks that the value of the company is. So we individually may have our own view of what a company is worth. The marketplace may have a very different view. And the opportunity for profit is to recognize differences and disparities there. So to understand where I'm going, you need to think about the fact that the value of a company today is really just the value of all the future earnings that it's going to make, or the future dividends or other cash flows that it's going to make. And we all have access, theoretically, to the same amount of information about what a company is going to do. But if you think about the game of chess, we all know how to play chess, theoretically. But some of us are better chess players than others. We'd probably all agree that Garry Kasparov is the best chess player, arguably of all time, and certainly of the present. So none of us can hope to beat him. In the same context, thinking about a company, we all have access theoretically to the same information. Some of us can do a better job of manipulating that information to recognize the true inherent value of a company. And to give you a simple example, let's think about Apple. Right? So Apple, again, I say that the value of Apple is going to be predicated on its future revenues. And those future revenues are going to depend on things like how many iPhones it's going to sell. So at any point in time, how can we know today how many Apple iPhones are going to be sold next year? If we were here in 2012, we might have, or 2010, 2011, we might have thought that the Apple iPhones, which are represented here in the green bars, that they're going to grow at that rate shown by the red arrow. On the other hand, if you move a couple of years further, you might think that the growth trend is going to be at the white arrow. And similarly, further on, you might think that the growth trend is going to be at the yellow arrow. Yet, as years pass, we get disconnects and discontinuities in sales. So to know today what the future earnings are going to be is very, very difficult. So if we can make better use of the information that's available to us today, and if we can identify new sources of information that will help us predict the future activities of a company, then we'll be better investors. So one way that companies and investors are moving in this direction is hedge funds, for example, are now turning to using satellites. And I'm going to talk about those in a moment. They also look at using social media, trying to make inferences from what we see taking place on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And of course, as Casimer mentioned, and Steve mentioned, there's also the idea of big data. So think about satellites, right? Traditionally we think about satellites as being used to predict the weather or for maybe military purposes. But hedge funds today are using satellites to look at crop yields. By looking at the color of different fields, they can basically interpret what level of crops are growing and what the volume of crops that are going to be produced is going to be. Similarly, hedge funds can look at parking lots outside shopping malls, and they can see how many cars are parked outside. So if there are more cars parked outside a shopping mall this year than last year, or this quarter than last quarter, the hedge funds can infer that the shopping malls are doing more business and the volume of sales is going to increase and profitability is going to increase. Similarly, hedge funds can use satellites to look at things like natural gas containers. And if you know anything about natural gas, you'll know that the tanks expand and contract depending on the amount of gas that's in them. So they can read this information using the satellites, and again, that'll give a competitive advantage to the hedge funds who are operating in the energy space. Similarly, a company called Orbital Insight, for example, are using satellites now to analyze traffic patterns in China. And they can, by looking at this information, they can predict the GDP changes quarter over quarter. So Orbital Analytics, for example, they can predict to about 78% of the time, they can anticipate whether or not a company is going to beat earnings. Similarly, oil traders can get access to information about where oil tankers currently are located in the world, where they're flowing to. So our students in the investment center can use this to, by looking at the Bloomberg terminals, get a sense of where the tankers are. So where are they coming from, where are they going to, how fast are they traveling, what's their expected time of arrival, what's their cargo. And as you can imagine, if you're an energy trader and you get access to this information, it will help you make judgments about the impact on the marketplace of this new supply of oil that will be coming. Similarly, companies look at social velocity. For example, tweets on Twitter. So a company that's launching a new product, for example, might monitor the stream of tweets that are coming out to get a sense of whether consumers are responding positively or negatively to a new product launch. So I give an example here of a company just which had an earnings miss or an earnings warning coming from an analyst, and Bloomberg was able to automatically alert investors to the fact that this stock was now peaking on Twitter, and it indicated that the sentiment of the tweets was negative rather than positive. So that's very, very useful information. In fact, Twitter has been shown to be very, very profitable for investors. A 2010 study showed that by looking at market sentiment on Twitter, you can, again, predict to about an 86% accuracy rate where the market is going to be, whether the market is going to go up or down over the next 3 days. So again, very, very useful information if you're an investor. So we've seen a lot of new technologies, as Ross and Casimer mentioned. I mean, if you look back to the 1980s, we started with email, and then we moved through, the DVDs and then the internet coming in the late 1980s, and Skype and crowdfunding. And now we're moving to a situation where we've got autonomous vehicles, and we've smart vehicles, smart banking, smart cars, smart everything pretty much. And a lot of this is going to be driven by big data. Everything that we do is going to be monitored. Every transaction that we do, whether it's in blockchain or anything else, is going to send information out to companies. Companies now have the ability to aggregate this data and take disparate pieces of information and put them together to come up with a comprehensive picture of who we are, what we do, where we go, who we visit, who our friends are, and things like that. So it can be used to personalize product offerings. It can be used to increase efficiencies, and it can also be used, to predict failure. For example, in the human resource space, big data analytics will allow a corporation to keep track of their employees, and more particularly to anticipate whether their employees are comfortable and happy in the workplace, or whether they're thinking about leaving. And this can save significant amounts of cash in terms of human resource costs, for example. And Ross mentioned blockchain, which is, again, a huge new development, particularly in the world of finance. And as Ross pointed out, it's Really, it's a paradigm shift from the way that we used to operate. We used to have a single repository for stock prices. We used to have a single repository for contracts. Contracts would have to be physically transferred. Now it's a peer-to-peer concept where, as you pointed out, we have two or whatever number of parties we have who are all connected, who all agree on what the terms of the contract or the terms of the transaction are going to be. And a huge benefit of this is that it's going to be instantaneous. It's going to be pretty much tamper-proof, and that's going to reduce the needs for auditors. It's going to reduce the needs for. It's going to significantly become more efficient and reduce expenses. And of course, one of the lessons I guess to take away from today is we all need to sell our stock in FedEx. Okay. And another technology to keep an eye out that's emerging is also the idea of quantum encryption, which I'm sure will be added into to blockchain. But with all of this new technology comes some privacy concerns. I mean, just today, a news story talking about Uber wants to add lifestyle tracking. Uber wants to know more about you, ostensibly so that they can offer more products. So, for example, you order a car, and Uber will be able to offer to have food delivered to your location when you get there, if you're going home, for example. They'd also be able to keep track of high traffic patterns and so know in advance where cars are likely to be needed and things like that. But this gets, again, to the issue of privacy. Even something as banal or mundane as using your Metro card. You need to be careful with your Metro card if you're traveling around New York City. Insider traders have been caught and convicted murderer caught on the basis of using their Metro card. We're all familiar with Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is a remarkable phenomenon, not just because it was a popular game, but more particularly from the market perspective, where the stock price of Nintendo went up by $7 billion in 2 days. Then, of course, fell back because the market realized that Nintendo didn't actually own the game. But nevertheless, it was really interesting because the market recognizes that there's a paradigm shift here with Pokemon Go. It's a new implementation of augmented reality that we haven't seen before. It's very popular, more popular than Twitter, and opens up the possibility for huge new revenue sources, in-app purchases and sponsored locations and things like that. I came across this the other day. I thought it was pretty interesting. I don't know if anybody will recognize this. It's a new way of visualizing data. In this context, it's looking at email traffic and the people with whom one is communicating. There's actually Hillary Clinton's email map. Pretty interesting. Okay. And so again, technology is becoming more important. Computers are now starting to move into the hedge fund space. Almost 10% of hedge funds are now driven largely by computers. So that's about $300 billion currently been managed by computers. And technology is really changing. We're all familiar with the size of computers back in the days of the space race, the race to the moon and all that. Now we can do the same thing on our iPhone. We can track satellites. And so if I wanted to send somebody up in the Apollo, I guess I could probably do it from my bedroom. But even in farming, pretty much any area of economic activity that you can think about, computers, autonomous technology, blockchain, big data is becoming prevalent. So farming, for example, we're now seeing the lettuce bot, a machine that will go out and spray lettuce and pick lettuce for you and do whatever you want. So everywhere we go, the world is changing. But the downside of that, of course, is that we're going to be losing jobs. Right? We're going to lose jobs in McDonald's. So those are graduates who were aiming at a career across the street. It's not going to happen. We now have these self-order kiosks. In those who wanted to go into financial advising, we got to be aware now that we've got robo-advisors coming along. These are going to manage your portfolio automatically. They're going to be very efficient. They're going to be low cost. They'll offer you cookie-cutter solutions, but they'll probably evolve over time and become much more sophisticated. Will they take over? Maybe, maybe not. We probably will always need human reassurance, people to advise us that, yeah, we're doing the right thing. But certainly it's a trend that we're not going to get away from. We probably all have seen autonomous vehicles, Amazon promising to deliver our packages by drones. Believe it or not, that was only 2013 that they first broached that subject, and we're all completely familiar with drones now. It's remarkable how technology is changing. Financial exchanges, we've probably seen the movie Trading Places, right? Or we've all seen pictures of trading floors with thousands or hundreds of screaming brokers. Now it's just computers. Bats, for example, one of the firms that we went to visit last week, or a couple of weeks ago on our career track, they do almost as much business as the New York Stock Exchange. They're the second largest exchange in the country, the biggest in Europe. They do billions of shares transacted every day. They do that with about 280 employees. New York Stock Exchange in the day would have had probably 5,000 employees. Goldman Sachs had 600 traders 10 years ago making markets. Now they've got 10 traders doing the same thing, making markets in stocks. In fact, Goldman has more programmers than Facebook. Goldman is a technology company. All the investment banks are technology companies. Okay, so almost done here. And then just want to talk briefly about the whole concept of disintermediation, which is a fancy word for really the democratization of finance, giving people back control. We're now seeing it in investing, where you can invest directly yourself instead of using a stockbroker, where you can set up a business now without using an investment banker. You can use crowdfunding. Just business in general has been disintermediated, where if you want to go somewhere on vacation, you can now use Airbnb and negotiate directly with a householder. In the crowdfunding, we've got a whole plethora of new enterprises. We've probably all heard of Kickstarter. So any entrepreneurs in the audience, if you're thinking about setting up a business, just use one of these firms. In fact, it's really interesting how important and how significant digital disruption has been. Uber, one of the largest transportation companies in the world, doesn't own any cars. Facebook, one of the largest entertainment and information companies, doesn't produce any information. Alibaba has no inventory, and Airbnb has no real estate. And yet these are the biggest companies in their space. So all of this is having a big impact. It's leading to obsolescence, right? Remember, I don't remember the 1950s. Maybe some of you guys do. But typing pools, right? Typing pools don't exist anymore. Telephone exchanges, switchboard operators don't exist anymore. All those jobs have disappeared. And I'm sure we can think of a myriad of other examples. So are they going to be replaced? Yeah, they're going to be replaced by knowledge workers. I mean, 30 years ago, we didn't have IT. We didn't have desktop support. We didn't have people running servers for us and doing all of that. So the world is changing. Innovation leads to new careers, programming, data analytics, and so forth. But trying to bring it all back together, information is key. We're in a disruptive phase of the economy. The world is changing faster now than it has ever changed. We've got more information being created now, today, instantaneously, than ever before in our human history. Probably more information created today than in all of recorded history up until now. So this information brings a lot of advantages to us. It has huge impacts on our personal lives, on our investments, huge impacts on companies and how they operate and how efficient they're going to be. But it brings remarkable new challenges in terms of security, in terms of privacy, and frankly, in terms of career disruption, dislocation. So it's going to have huge societal implications, and we're going to have to think very seriously about it.
Thank you very much. Well, after all the talk of automation, we're gonna switch gears a little bit here, and we're going to hear from our final speaker, Dr. Jenn Eden, who's an assistant professor of communication. She received her doctorate from Arizona State University, and her research interests focus on the dark side of interpersonal interactions, including stalking, unrequited love, gossip, and cyberbullying.
Sounds a lot like me.
Yeah, right? Much of her work has helped increase awareness of social networking safety, and she continues to pursue projects that will offer solutions to various cyber-related phenomenon. And today she is going to be speaking about cyberbullying and how emerging technology is changing the way adolescents and teenagers, among others, interact. Dr. Eden.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. When I was 13, I had a falling out with my best friend, wrote Frances Deep from The Atlantic. We were so close that she knew the answer to my security question, and so it didn't matter if I changed my password. Over the course of 3 years, she would go in and delete all of my emails, leaving only cruel notes for me from my account as the sole message in my inbox. The worst part were the calendar reminders written in first person notifying me of my own plans to kill myself. I would be quietly browsing and then a reminder would pop up, throw myself off a bridge. Tragically, this story is not unique. Open up the newspaper any given day and stories like this abound. Over the past decades, researchers from a variety of disciplines, including communication studies, and myself in that area, have investigated the impact that technology has had on our interpersonal relationships. And in line with today's panel, I wanted to talk really briefly about 3 ways that technology has disrupted interpersonal relationships. First, although mediated technology can foster connection, it can, of course, hurt others. Second, technology has changed the way that we think about traditional bullying and has moved that more into the realm of cyberbullying, and in turn has affected how we study and how we address this phenomenon. And finally, the very technology that can cyberbully can also be used to disrupt cyberbullying, such as bullying apps and counseling apps and things like that. So to start, my first point, mediated communication technology is a wonderful tool that can draw us together, but of course, as I said, it can also hurt others, disrupting what we have in terms of our positive pro-social relationships with one another. Interpersonal relationships are fundamental to our survival, and it is only through communication that we initiate, maintain, and even terminate those relationships. And this new media that we have has now kind of disrupted those relationships, exploited them, and in turn has been used, that technology has been used to hurt us. So there's a long tradition of research on the importance of connection and intimacy and closeness in relationships. We even have bioevolutionary and sociocultural perspectives and phenomena that look at just how important this is. For instance, the need to belong theory says that failing to form and maintain relationships is both psychologically aversive and physically aversive. And there's been studies looking at failure to thrive in terms of newborn babies, elderly individuals, and even pets and animals. And technology is something that has been used to help us connect and mitigate the distance that we have in terms of long-distance relationships and things like that. The synchronicity of nonverbal cues and the ability to read nonverbal behaviors can bring us closer together. Unfortunately, technology has also impacted some of our personal characteristics and our relationships. So for instance, narcissism, or being focused on yourself and your own appearance, has been investigated extensively. And the technology that we have now has increased our craving for attention from other people in terms of wanting to get the most amount of likes, follows, retweets, comments, follow backs. There's apps that track how many followers we have, who follows us, who unfollows us, all of that stuff, right? And the millennial generation is in fact the most narcissistic generation in terms of most recent research. And perhaps this is because the millennials are digital natives. They have learned in part how to connect to people through technology. There's other things that relate to this as well. So with technology, we have increased deception. Sometimes rather banal kind of things like impression management and identity management, brand management. Other times we're thinking about things much more not so innocuous, like catfishing, which we have TV shows about now, cyber stalking, cyberbullying, phishing, things like that. In fact, a lot of research in communication and in psychology has even looked at the impact that technology has on our ability to have face-to-face communication. So communication competence and the skill to have a conversation is something that we have to practice, something that we have to be able to adapt in conversations, read our nonverbal skills, all sorts of stuff. So this brings me to my second point. Technology has disrupted traditional bullying and has now opened up this new forum in terms of cyberbullying. So traditional bullying was done on the schoolyard. It was kicking or shoving each other, ignoring people or excluding people, telling lies, spreading rumors. And in general, the bullied person felt like they could not defend themselves. One recent study of 15,000 students in the grades 6 through 10 reported that 20% reported bullying individuals, and roughly 20% of those students reported being bullied as well. Boys were more likely to bully than girls, and girls, if they chose to bully, were more likely to use indirect methods, such as making someone feel like they weren't accepted or part of the group, or making someone feel excluded. And we're going to come back to that in a second. there's a couple different things that I wanted to point out in terms of differences between bullying and cyberbullying. The first is that with traditional bullying, this occurs at a particular time in a particular location. Usually, bullying happens after school or bullying happens on the schoolyard. Cyberbullying can happen, in fact, anywhere. And most often, cyberbullying occurs, especially for junior high kids, after school and kind of, not on the schoolyard. Bullying, when we're talking about traditional bullying, also the bully is known. The person is visible. And in cyberbullying, the bully is not necessarily known. In fact, approximately half of cyberbullying victims don't even know who it is who is cyberbullying them. The third is bullying is witnessed by a finite number of people. So the people in the schoolyard watch what's going on, and it's only spread as far as the people who see this. Whereas cyberbullying is something that can be spread rapidly and quickly, broadly, across all sorts of different platforms. And then the last point I wanted to make is that bullies are traditionally bigger, stronger, more popular, and this is not necessarily the case with cyberbullies. Cyberbullying does not necessarily require you to be bigger and stronger. Cyberbullies can assert their dominance or retribution through a way that they might not be able to do on the schoolyard. So I wanted to talk really quickly also about prevalence of cyberbullying. In one of the most recent studies that I conducted, 60% of middle school students reported being the victim of cyberbullying. Of those victims, 12% that they said they were cyberbullied by a sibling, 25% by a friend, 50% by a stranger who they didn't know. 50% of middle school students were the perpetrators of cyberbullying as well. And they said that 60% of the time they bullied their friends, 60% said they bullied someone else at school, 16% said that they bullied a sibling, and 55% said that they bullied just a stranger, so anybody, right? In fact, there were some sex differences. So females were more likely to be the perpetrators of cyberbullying than men, and females were also more likely to be the victims than men. And I think this is an interesting point that kind of relates to the fact that when females bully, they are more likely to do this through indirect means. So I wanted to look at, are there some characteristics that we could describe perpetrators so that we could stop this process? And so I hypothesized a bunch of different things that might relate to individual characteristics of perpetrators. So for instance, I hypothesized, well, maybe it's their verbal aggression skills, right? More typically verbal aggressive people kind of enact this online. Maybe it's that they engage in more risky behavior. So middle schoolers who smoke or drink, have detention, get suspended, perhaps they're more likely to cyberbully. I also thought maybe there was something that related to the breadth and depth of their technology use. So maybe if they spend more time online or they have a huge amount of technologies that they use, that might play a role. And finally, of course, I thought maybe parental limits or parental monitoring might have something to play, right? So hopefully if parents are watching, monitoring, limiting, if they have technology on their computers, we can, hopefully that has an impact. So what are my results? Unfortunately, only verbal aggression, risky behaviors, and victimization predicted whether or not you were going to be a perpetrator. Kind of scary results, right? One of the biggest takeaways from this is that parental monitoring, limiting what your kids can see and do, and you making sure that you check in and what websites are you looking at, had no impact on perpetration, right? Parents have no impact on that. So the final thing that I wanted to say, which brings me to my third point, is the very technology that can cyberbully can also disrupt cyberbullying. So one of the things that we found is as students gain greater access to the primary technologies that you can use to cyberbully, like social networking sites, cell phones, emails, all of that stuff, they start to feel a little bit more positive about cyberbullying and feel less likely to engage in steps to address cyberbullying as they get older. So I get more access to things, and then I kind of care less about protecting myself. So there's a couple things that we've found that have actually helped. And the first is cyberbullying interventions in middle schools. So I've run several experiments on my own addressing this, which are kind of too long to get into here. But those are very effective in terms of raising students' perceptions of severity in terms of cyberbullying, susceptibility that it could happen to you, and that they are actually able to engage in the solutions that we provide in that particular intervention. The second thing is that there are several apps that you can use to report instances and incidents of cyberbullying. Many junior high school students don't report that they are being bullied, sometimes because they think that the faculty members aren't going to be able to handle it, or they don't want to make it worse. And so there's apps that you can log into anonymously to report things and to be able to tell someone what's going on. And the last thing, which I think is kind of interesting and relates to something that one of our panelists said, is this idea of tailored messages. And so hopefully we can have some conversations about that as well. So tailored messages are unique messages that reach one specific person that are based on characteristics unique to that one person. So I can go on, enter information about my beliefs, my attitudes, my norms, my behaviors, and then I can receive a unique tailored message just to myself to reinforce my kind of anti-cyberbullying and pro-social networking safety kind of messages. So in general, there's kind of a variety of things that technology aims to impact in terms of our interpersonal relationships. And it's only kind of with open forums like this that we can kind of come to some solutions. So thank you very much.
All right, well, as promised, we're going to open up for questions in just a second, but maybe I could kick off the questions by just asking, and I think it segues very nicely into what you were just talking about, Jenn. Where should we have this in the curriculum? What is it that we need? It's happening so fast. How do we as educators keep up with the disruptive technologies so we are effectively educating our students for what we may not even know is coming next?
From my research in cyberbullying only, I've actually found that 7th grade is the place where students start to recognize that they can cyberbully and that they can get away with that. In 6th grade, there's about 6% of middle school students engage in cyberbullying, but by 8th grade, it's around 50%. So if there's a place to teach students about cyberbullying and things like that, it would be in middle school and hopefully right around 7th grade. But there's a lot of other things outside of cyberbullying that we can certainly talk about that relate to that.
What do you think?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, there's actually a lot of things that happen around middle school age. One of the other things that I'm passionate about is STEM education and STEAM education. And I do a lot of work with Lego Robotics and the first Lego League organization. They found that there's a lot of underrepresented groups, women, minorities, other things. The place where we start to lose them is middle school. That's a transformative time. It's an inflection point. So the very time that they're starting to ramp up on cyberbullying is the time when they're starting to say, I really don't want to do this for a living. I'd prefer to follow a celebrity or be a rock star or a basketball player. First Lego League counteracts that by putting in these programs that we run in middle school and high school, getting kids together in groups, teams, with a coach, and training them on how to react in these situations. So it's not just teaching them how to code. We can do that. It's teaching them how to interact with one another in teams, teaching them principles like gracious professionalism, treating others the way you want to be treated. So I think there's some overlap between our technology education and the social education that you were mentioning that could be well targeted in middle school. I'm very pleased that a lot of our Marist college students are actually volunteering to support these programs and coming with me to mentor these students in the lower grades. So perhaps we can start up a more positive reinforcement cycle.
Great idea.
What do you think about finance education?
Well, I think, I don't know if they need to learn about blockchain in 3rd grade, but I think the STEM point you made is fundamental in engaging all the way from kindergarten up through all of the STEM curricula and keeping that in focus for as long as we can to allow children to develop so that they're not off just wanting to be a movie star and then end up across the street at McDonald's and then get automated out. So I think the fundamentals are what we need to reinforce.
And it seems to me this is one of the dark sides of one of the benefits of the internet. I mean, one of the advantages of the internet is the anonymity that we have. But clearly, I would imagine that that's really one of the reasons why we have this cyberbullying. In the old days, there was a stigma against anonymous letters and sneaky behavior, and that seems to have disappeared now. That kids think it's cool to be sending nasty messages. So, I don't know how we're going to deal with that. I think if we have the anonymity, it may be very difficult to combat.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
Good afternoon. Dr. Eden, I'm a school counselor in a middle school.
Okay.
So I heard much of what you had to say, and it rung true for me. I think part of what happens in this day and age is almost an information poisoning. And I feel especially bad. Females seem to be, at least in my mind, more susceptible than males do. But for example, I'm attending a party. I take a Snapchat or an Instagram of the good time I'm having. People who aren't at the party see it and feel put upon, less than, people don't like me. So it's almost like we have too much information. Years ago, if you gossiped with someone, if you didn't hear it, it didn't bother you. You had no knowledge of it. Now everything's instantaneous. You know every bad thing that everybody's saying about you, even if it wasn't intended. And sometimes a thing as benign as a picture of a party hits you in your heart. So.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of individual level characteristics, self-esteem and things like that especially go along with junior high and women and things like that. But certainly that feeling of ostracism and exclusion is something that is so important in middle school and is part of that cyberbullying experience. Great point.
Yeah, she's coming.
I found this to be actually very interesting to me because I have an import business. So every one of you hit something that affects me. The organization, the blockchain thing, which I never heard of before, quite frankly, I'm a small business. I'm looking forward to that because I guess what you're saying is that there are parts that are out there in the market, products out there in the market, to get certain parts of a process done, but it needs something that it hits them all. Case in point, when I'm starting my seasonal business, I have to sign a contract with the credit card company, and I'm doing that with a digital signature. There's no transfer of hard copy. And then I have to turn around and send something over to the government. Yep. That's a piece of paper. It takes me a long time to figure out, put it all together, and then I have to use FedEx or overnight, whatever, to get documents to my shipping company or the custom agents. So if I had something that was cohesive, but is that something that you're talking about is the back end, and then there's going to be platforms on the top of that that are what a little business could buy? I mean, these things are all out there, but for half the businesses, because they say we're mostly consist of small businesses, well, how am I going to get access to that?
Well, one way is the way I think you'll see blockchain coming to perhaps a small business like you is that if you're part of a supply chain, whether you're the supplier or you're getting it, a lot of suppliers will start to only transact electronically. There will be a blockchain that's involved in it. You will be able to once you identify yourself and properly register, you will become part of that. So it'll become transparent. You won't have to buy a lot of software or download a lot of things. It'll just become the way you start to do business with others. But it'll start with the larger corporation. So IBM today has a program in place for all of our suppliers globally. It's being implemented now on the blockchain. And over the next 2 years, we will require all of our suppliers to interact with us that way, eliminating paper, but also now making the communication with us smooth, fast, secure, and most importantly, the disruption that goes on with mailing things. I mail you a product and then somebody puts it aside and you didn't see it, right? So you didn't inventory it. So you call me to say, hey, you didn't send me that. All those things with blockchain will start to get solved. So I think it'll be the bigger companies reaching out to smaller individual companies will be the way you feel it first. It's an idea.
So it'll be somewhat analogous maybe to PayPal, like our experience with PayPal.
Yes, easy to use.
PayPal on steroids.
But creates a paperless, it's then paperless, right?
Just to continue on so you see the relevancy,
Right.
Not that there's necessarily always a question, but obviously the cybersecurity, I worry about all the time. And in the cloud thing, I mean, I resisted that for a long time. I'm not putting my stuff up there and having either the government find it or somebody else that wants my financial information. Afraid of that. Okay, then the analytics. Then we got the issue of too much information, and what do you do with it? well, it's great to have this, but now I'm the company and I'm overwhelmed. What's relevant? What do I really do? And what am I going to do? And I think there's a problem there where the companies will have that information and just be lost with, I don't know how to do it, and then actually do it.
Where is the wisdom we've lost in information?
Pardon me?
There's a good quote, where is the wisdom we have lost in information?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think what we'll find is that, and Casimer, you can probably talk more about this in terms of machine learning, how computers effectively train themselves in order to be able to find information. Like it's used now in medical research and researching drugs. Google Translate, for example, is a product of machine learning and so forth.
That's very true. There's a lot of times now where it's more machines talking to other machines than machines talking to people. So this whole process of automation is not just replacing things that human beings used to do. It's necessary because the process that you're interacting with is already fully automated. Well, the only way you can keep up with that is if you automate your end of it, and it drives us to this level of inter-machine communications on a scale we've never seen before.
Mm-hmm. There's also some interesting new technology that someone like a small business owner could take advantage of. And I'll just cite IBM's Watson Analytics that's on the cloud. You could take a lot of your information and securely put it into Watson Analytics. And without a data scientist or computer savvy knowledge, the Watson will start to extract wisdom, insight out of your data, and you can interact with it as a non-geeky, techie professional, as a business person. So it's machine learning is underneath it, but you'll be able to take your personal business information. It is in the cloud, but there are ways to secure it, believe it or not, and encrypt it, and have the machine tell you the insights, even though you don't know the right questions to ask. It will give you insights anyway.
Career opportunities for people. If you run a business and you getting all this information and you don't know how to actually start something, like sit in your team and everybody gets assigned a role, what are we going to do with this? So I think that there's an opportunity for anybody who wants to get in consulting and how to take that information. Okay, it's out there, but now what? And then the last one is cybersecurity, bullying and all that. And I don't know what I want to call it that, but another thing I resisted, and I'm a technically person, I like technology, but I was afraid of starting a Facebook page as a company. I don't want some customer who was disgruntled about one of my products that fell apart or whatever happened to it, putting something up there. And so that's a concern to me also as a business, is what customers are saying about me. Write the good stuff, don't write the bad. So thank you very much, everybody. There was a lot of insight in each component of my personal background.
Great.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you guys for taking the time to provide this. This was very insightful. My question is, how does cybersecurity plan to keep up with the future of the smart home industry and smart things?
Well, as I said, everything is being automated. We're seeing sensors deployed everywhere. The light systems, the thermostat, not only the security on the doors and windows, but all the systems that normally run your household are starting to gradually become automated. Google has systems to do this. You've probably seen these commercials for devices that you can put on your nightstand. You talk to it and tell it to play a song, and it hears you and it plays the song in response. All this type of home automation is starting to get traction. Cybersecurity is not yet been a major priority for them. Everybody is pushing to get things to market as fast as they can, try to find the sweet spot, that device that's like a smartphone or like the early Apple computers or the iPods that's going to break open a multi-billion-dollar market. Unfortunately, they haven't really been designing it from the ground up with security in there. So some systems are better than others. There's a lot of online reporting systems that are being developed that lets you rank them. So if you're a savvy consumer, you can look at it from a security viewpoint as well as convenience and everything else. But even beyond home automation, the same statements that I just made also apply to this emerging Internet of Things, where everything has a network address, everything can talk to everything else. In that kind of an environment, we don't have architectures or paradigms as to how to secure things. Right? The old-fashioned approach breaks down. Used to be you could secure things by putting them in a room, locking the door. Physical security was enough. Now that everything is connected on a network, even traditional approaches like firewalls, filters, and things are breaking down because there's so many devices out there. So to counteract that, we're trying to use more of big data, analytics, trying to use the same technology that is helping the attackers in order to build a more cost-effective defense. Much as you were saying, the same technology that causes the problem can also disrupt and provide solutions. So we can automate our security the same way people automate their attacks. We can take advantage of the fact that everything's connected to the internet to monitor everything and get a profile of who's trying to break in so we can push back on that. This is some of the stuff that we're exploring with our cloud security grant, trying to make cloud data centers more secure. Also, obviously, we're looking at technologies like blockchain as a way to produce these immutable lists so that you know every change that was made to your home system and when it was made and who made it, and it's not possible to falsify that list. So you end up with a record of who's making the necessary changes. Sometimes you can stop them in advance, but at least you can go back and audit them to catch what's going on later. So it's kind of interesting because that same technology for home automation is being applied to small businesses, large industries, enterprise computing, and a lot of the businesses you mentioned, the drone delivery, the Pokemon systems, all those have to be secured. And so new security architectures evolve in response to new threats, and that's an ongoing process.
Uh-oh.
This is very good. I just have an observation, then a question. A couple of observations and questions. You know, we don't let children drive automobiles when they're in 5th grade. And so we try our best to raise our children and give them enough protection from information and environments until they have enough good judgment to make good decisions most of the time. So I don't think technology is going to solve all of our problems. I think we're going to have to start with education, with parents involved, the kids involved. They're going to have to earn their right to be able to use something as powerful of a weapon, more powerful, more hurtful than a car could ever be. And so I don't think technology is going to solve it all. Just an observation. I think in security, there is no blockchain that works without powerful security, and there is no inside. Everything's outside. And so we all talk about dark nets. One day I think we're going to have to evolve to a white net, where I'm willing to get on a network where I am willing to identify myself. In fact, it's forced by my ISP. Now we can start to write some security systems that make some sense. If you want to be in the unwashed Wild West, go ahead, have a good time. If you want to be willing to let the world know who you are and where you are, with all the risks attendant with that, then I can make a system that's reasonably secure. So I don't think technology is going to be able to chase the unwashed Wild West. Yeah. I think we will, if we're playing defense all the time, then we're going to have a very difficult time. So the real thing is this collection of intellect has got to get together one day and not say, what are we doing? But saying, what must we do so that these 90% of things we'd all like to do safely, we can do. And that takes all of you together. It takes education. It takes technology. Then the question I have for you, so my comment's done, is I really do believe that we have been, in my lifetime, I can't tell you how many people I put out of work, from Victor calculator operators to typewriter people to stock clerks to order entry folks. That's just exhilarating, no question. You made the point. It's really solid. What does this world do when we have no jobs? There's not a job we can describe today that, as machines get more intelligent, as they really get to learn, as you don't even know you're dealing with them, it's going to eat jobs. And it's not new, just accelerating. 90% of the people were involved in food production in the late 1800s. It's 1% now. So the productivity has been phenomenal, and they're making 1,000 times more food, some of it not so safe. So what are we going to do when there are no jobs in this world? And the reason there aren't is because all of you are doing a good job at what you do.
I don't know what the answer to that would be.
I
think it's something for us to talk about.
I guess I'll start. I think that we might have said the same thing back in the 1950s, right? Those of you who were around, with stenography, typing pools, and all of that. Those jobs disappeared, but new IT jobs, computer programming and desktop support and all of that, those whole new industries evolved. So who's to say that new industries are not going to evolve in the future to replace these jobs? Now, having said that, we will still have societal difficulties because if somebody's going to be relatively unskilled, is there going to be work for them to do that, maybe that a computer is going to do? If somebody's a, ditch digger or whatever, is there going to be a role for them? Maybe you'll need, the ability to, understand computer technology or whatever to be a knowledge worker. I mean, it's hard as that. But then, 70% of our economy is a service economy. So, is a computer going to cut your hair in the future? Maybe. I mean, who knows? Who knows?
We need innovators to think up what the new jobs will be. Maybe that's what we should be teaching our students is how to be innovative.
I think that's important. Also, just a quick comment backwards on one of the reasons why security is so hard. You mentioned that what we need is a white network. What if there was this nice place where we could all openly identify ourselves with all the risks and things that are attendant to that? There is a big debate in the industry right now about whether we get more security through public disclosure or more through anonymity, because there is a place for both. That approach sounds very good, and I applaud that, and I would think we'd like to do that. On the other hand, there are parts of the world today where computer systems were hacked, and they revealed that people in their country, I don't think it's happened in the United States yet, thank goodness, but there are countries in the world where systems were hacked and it was revealed that people were online had a certain sexual preference or had a certain religious inclination or a certain political view. And those parts of the world, you get stoned to death for that. Anonymity still plays a really important role. So we can't get rid of anonymity and we can't make everyone anonymous either. There's some kind of a ground in the middle, and that's why you hear all this debate. The human factor, but the fact that we try to think of as technologists every day has ethical and other dimensions, which is why it's so great that we're all working at this broad-based liberal arts institution, that we can consider those interdimensional impacts. So just a quick comment, it's not always as idealized or as easy as we might think because there's so many diverse communities of people in this world, and they have very different needs and requirements. It's never going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. So part of our challenge is coming up with how to customize that and make sure that people get what they need when they need it.
I find this very fascinating. I am not generally a technological person, but I presented so beautifully. I've understood everything. But I keep coming back to a concern. I graduated from here in 1974. I'm a psychologist, and I mostly deal with children. And what I've noticed over my 30 years of practice or so is that we are starting to lose some very basic human functions and connection. Like this gentleman just here talked about, we'll have different jobs. And that's true, you're absolutely right. But we are losing some of the basic human, evolutionary developments of human beings that have to do with connections and communications. And I struggle with that in my practice. I struggle with it with teachers. Problem-solving skills for young children are delayed. They're delayed because it's not with another human being, and they don't know how to look at the person or gauge a lot of things. And the parents are also on the phone when they're not looking at their child in the stroller. And one other thing about Facebook is that parents tend to spend, I feel, and a number of psychologists have gotten together and talked about this, more time taking pictures of their children to post their little pictures and reflections than interacting with the child. And we talked about how devastating that is in terms of development. So I don't know what else to say about this, but I wanted to raise it because you are all brilliant, socialized, communicative people, but you're all old enough to be that way. You weren't raised with from infancy with an iPad in front of your face. And I think we need to think about that a little bit too with all the developments that you're all talking about in the marketplace and the banks and all of that stuff.
Well, I think it gets back to your issue about technology dehumanizes us. And so, kids in the old days, they would probably feel remorse if they went and beat the crap out of somebody, whereas now they can go online and send a nasty anonymous message and they don't feel any guilt, and it's because they're detached, dissociated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and there's some interesting kind of research in being able to practice those skills. The interpersonal communication is a skill, as you were saying, that we have to practice. We have to be able to be adaptable, spontaneous, to be able to handle questions, to be able to practice reading emotional content on someone's face and nonverbal behaviors. And so we are kind of losing out to some degree on the practice of that side. On the flip side, there are a lot of things that we are getting out of having the technology and the connection between things. So the being able to maintain those best friendships that, where my best friend lives far away and I can constantly communicate with her and keep updated, that does foster a much closer relationship there. But I think that's absolutely true. There has to be a balance between both of those things.
Do you believe that biometric authentication is going to play a key role in cybersecurity and protecting all these systems?
Well, yeah, today there are applications that do that. I can unlock my cell phone with my fingerprint and so forth. There's going to be more and more of that. Face recognition technology is getting extremely good now. It's surprising how easy it is to pick people out of a crowd when you're scanning with a camera. So it's always going to have a role, and that role is probably going to grow. Having said that, it's not going to become the be-all and end-all. There's always going to be issues with false positives and false negatives. Right? Yes, I can unlock my phone with my fingerprint, but if I'm just played a football game and I'm dirty and sweaty, I'm going to have a hard time doing that. If I have a cold, it's not going to recognize my voice when I try to talk to it. If it's a windy day, it won't recognize my voice when I'm trying to talk to it. There's so much variability in those metrics that we usually rely on 2- or 3-factor authentication to do the whole job. So yes, biometrics are going to play a role. It's going to be increasing, but it's always going to be supplemented by something else.
We see a multimodal approach as being one, especially for smartphones, where you're going to be doing so much interaction with finances and things like that, where it controls your home, do your finance on it. Where we do see a move towards multimodal with Samsung introducing iris scan on top of the fingerprint scan. Is that going to be enough to keep this secure?
Well, as I said before, not only does the technology evolve to counter new threats, but new threats always emerge that we then have to counter in the future. So we go through these cycles, much like we mentioned about introducing new jobs. We went from the stenography pools to doing other things. We went from a lot of people doing food production to a few people doing it. In the security world, we're always doing that, going back and forth. So I don't think there's ever going to be an end to the cycle of building new security systems, because no system is perfect. Whatever we do, there's going to be vulnerabilities. Someone's going to try to fix that, and the new fixing technology will have vulnerabilities of its own. So you have to get used to living with this as a fact of life. You have to be a very malleable kind of personality to do this, because things are always changing. You never get to the end, and you never will. So is it going to be enough? For a while it will be, and then someone will figure out how to fake an iris scan with a hologram, and then we'll be on to the next thing. Right? And then we'll develop quantum cryptography, which you mentioned, and that will work for a while. and then someone will figure out how to use a quantum computer to break that, and we'll be on to the next thing. So any given security technology has a window where it's useful. And I think eventually it all gets obsoleted. It's just a question of how long it's useful and how good a job it does while it's there.
But for now, next 5 years, maybe 10, multi-factor authentication is the way that most businesses and governments are going. 5 factors, 8, not iris and thumb, 5 factors, 8 factors, 10 factors. So that is the kind of the state of the art today. Jim?
On one of the pieces, you're talking about endpoint security. You're trying to get into the system.
Right.
A lot of the hacks are going to be farther in the system, so you're going to sign into a compromised system and in fact give it more information.
Right.
So some of the real risks, while that's not a pure authentication capability, is the fact that the system you're logging into may not well be secure. Right?
That's very true. So all this stuff, irises and fingerprints and whatnot, protects the perimeter of people logging in. Certainly there's threats that come from other directions. We need protections against those as well. That's why it's so hard to build these secure systems and why it's so hard to make anything and claim it's really, really secure, because there are so many ways these things can be compromised. And with all the people out there trying to break in, someone is going to find the 1 or 2 things that you missed. That's why it's so hard to produce a system and say it's completely secure. Can we get to 99, 98%? Probably, with things like blockchain and some other multi-factor authentication schemes. But you never get to 100%, and you never will.
Well, I've been given the it's time sign from the back of the room. I hope that this has been a very thought-provoking panel for all of you, and please join me in thanking our panelists one more time. Thank you. And thank you for being here.